These are the German versions of Valerian and Laureline. For whatever reason, they once chose to name her Veronique in Germany instead of Laureline. But the title was changed in other languages as well. For instance, in Sweden and Denmark, the heroes are called Linda and Valentin. In the wake of that movie, they published a shrunken version of Valerian, but I don't have to tell you what I think of this habit of shrinking down European-sized comics. It's a crime. But here are the original-sized collections put out by Carlsen some years ago. 7 books collecting 21 European album-sized volumes, 4 years in the life of the main protagonists, Valerian and Laureline, or 4,000 years due to time travel magic, and 40 years, 4 decades in which they have been created. It's amazing that the creative duo behind Valerian and Laureline has been always the same. The artist Jean-Claude Meziere and the writer Pierre Christin. Even though they both did a lot of other stuff. Meziere, for example, did designs for Luc Besson's Fifth Element, and Pierre Christin wrote a lot of other books and comics, especially the corporations with Enki Bilal are pretty famous, I guess. And they had a short cameo appearance in the comic. There's one page with some Russians on screens, which were directly taken out of one of these Enki Bilal comics. I don't want to comment on the claim that Valerian inspired Star Wars. There are a lot of striking similarities between some episodes of Valerian and Star Wars, of course, but unless there will be a quote from George Lucas or whoever to confirm that reasonable suspicion, it stays unproven, I guess, and quite frankly, I think it's a bit tiresome and misleading, maybe dangerous, to value the comic because of his possible effects on one or the other movie. That being said, I don't come around to say 1 or 2 words about one movie that has obviously a lot to do with the comic, and that's the recent Valerian movie, directed by Luc Besson. Here you can see the comic Ambassador of Shadows, 46 pages of loose cartooning from Meziere that laid the ground for more than 2 hours of visual bombast by Besson. Even though the comic contains more or less all the basic ideas that are paraphrased in the movie, it is rather a sketch in comparison to the movie. But in this case, I prefer the sketch big time. What the movie does in a very convincing way is fleshing out all the crazy ideas of Christin and Meziere to build this future world in 3D with all the meticulous details that can't be found in Meziere's sketchy drawings. The visuals are nothing short of amazing. But WTF, the dialogue, the actors, Cara Delevingne, or however you pronounce her name, okay, she's pretty even though her acting skills are obviously limited. But the Valerian played by Dan DeHaan, or however he is pronounced as well, he is simply Valerian, not the actor. Sorry, but maybe it's just a miscast, but this Valerian is simply an annoyance, a douchebag, a pale-faced nerd who basically looks like a 16-year-old kid on too much coffee who tries desperately to act like a womanizer. Hashtag not my Valerian. And whoever wrote the dialogue, especially between Valerian and Laureline. No soup for you. All that I want to marry you / you don't know what love is BS has to be swiped directly from one generic TV soap. It wasn't taken out of the comic, that's for sure. Don't let me start about these Avatar-esque creatures in their over-the-top and kitschy innocence and goodness. Ah, Besson, you could do better than that. Sometimes even the details bothered me quite a lot. For an example, the grumpy converter from Bluxte is a funny and a bit gross creature at the same time. Its very special charm is due to the fact that it is always grumpy and it craps out everything which is feeded to him but multiplied. Luc Besson's grumpy converter from Bluxte is just cute, well, sort of, but not grumpy, and the fact where all the multiplied stuff comes from, its asshole, is something that we can guess but never been shown, while the comic has its way in showing us this in all explicit fashion. There you have the definition of anal and fandom, I guess, and I apologize to all of you who enjoyed the movie and don't want to be bothered with my hair-splitting and nitpicking negativity. It's really unfortunate because the movie could have been amazing. The intro sequence was some of the best I've seen for a long time. I'm actually not sure what I think of the criticism that Valerian, the movie, contains a mix of ideas that we have seen in a similar fashion on the movie screen in the aforementioned Avatar and Star Wars up to Alien and Star Trek. Besson would shrug off these accusations with a hint that these movies were apparently the ones that were inspired, not to say have stolen, from the comic Valerian. Anyhow, that was a lot of comment on the movie, despite the fact that I actually wanted to focus on the comics from Meziere and Christin. So let's talk about the comic proper. I was actually very late to the party. Just 1 or 2 years ago I bought all these volumes. I didn't do it earlier because I wasn't too crazy about Meziere's loose cartooning. As I stated many times, in science fiction comics I usually prefer more realistic art styles. And even though Meziere's art has grown on me since, and in many ways it's a very good match for Christin's imaginative writing, there are still some panels and arrangements that look a bit sloppy to me, definitely sketchy or unfinished. But on the upside, the art is always fluid and tells the stories in a very efficient way. You can often hear or read how much his art has improved since the beginning. I kind of agree and disagree with that assessment. He improved very quickly in the first 2 or 4 stories, that's true. But later on, I don't see so much improvement, given that it was done over the span of 4 decades. Consistence is the word, I guess. Anyhow, however Christin and Meziere had come up with these comics, their strength are the stories. Each of them more or less self-contained, with the exception of 2 two-part stories. But there's a red thread going on from the first to the last issue, and even a quite original wrap-up that's very fitting for a series about time travel. Yeah, the time travel. One aspect that Luc Besson skipped totally in the movie. Valerian and Laureline are sort of agents who can travel through space and time, with some new invention of space-time travel. They basically can be everywhere and everywhen they like or ought to be. Needless to say that this premise allows a zillion possible stories, and Christin and Meziere embrace these possibilities to transport not only their heroes, but the reader as well. It's escapism in its finest and purest form. Don't expect psychological depth in these stories. There's almost no inner monologue or something like this. Actually, I like this lack of psychological depth because it fits to adventure stories like these ones, I guess. Laureline and especially Valerian are very often just pawns in a game that they don't understand, but they play it with some wit and heroic ignorance nevertheless. The events and dangers propel the stories forward, literally flushing our heroes to the end of each story. It's very action-driven, despite there's no actual action in the DC or Marvel sense. No violence. No clobberings that last longer than 1 or 2 panels. They all get along fine, even though the stakes are pretty high sometimes. It's really an all-ages book, provided you're not offended by some very occasional nudity. These stories are very playful, gripping and funny. Take the cast of side characters from the aforementioned grumpy converter of Bluxt to the Shingus, the vicious Schnarf, who can be a very tame and sophisticated creature when you pinch off one of its ductless glands, or Uncle Albert, who always appreciates a good wine and meal regardless how desperate the situation is, or one Molto Cartese, an obvious homage to Hugo Pratt's Corto Maltese. And at some point Pierre Christin has a cameo himself as some whacked-out movie script writer. But at the latest, when you'll meet the Holy Trinity, yes, God, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, that's when you'll love this comic, but I don't want to spoil this for you, at least not for now. So, thanks for listening and watching. Goodbye.